discussing about form, meaning, and use in the teaching of grammar. So these three are very important aspects of grammar teaching. The teaching of form, meaning, and use. Now, how do we do this in grammar lessons? First one, form. From what we know of skill acquisition theory, fluency, or proceduralization of declarative knowledge, when we say declarative knowledge, it is the knowledge of grammar rule or pattern. It is very important the students have very strong background of the declarative knowledge, which is the knowledge of grammar rules or the patterns. Requires practice in which students use the target language point meaningfully while keeping the declarative knowledge in working memory. As I mentioned a while ago, it's very important that our students understand very well and they can remember those rules and those patterns. But at the same time, it is also being highlighted here that students need to be able to practice this declarative knowledge. To continue, it is important to emphasize meaningful practice of form for several reasons. Meaningful practice of form. First of all, meaningless mechanical drills such as repetition drills, commonly associated with behaviorist approaches to learning, do not engage the learner in the target behavior of conveying meaning through language. Importantly, it's highlighted here that meaningless mechanical drills, if we would just give drills, if we would just give repetitions of the patterns to our students, those would be meaningless and those would not really develop the grammatical skills of our students. They do not engage the learner in the target behavior of conveying meaning through language. Furthermore, because students are not engaged in target behavior, the inert knowledge problem is likely to materialize. So there will be problems in terms of the inert knowledge, in terms of the understanding, deeper understanding of the lessons. Moreover, inert knowledge is the knowledge that can be recalled when students are specifically asked to do so, but is not available for spontaneous use. When we say inert knowledge, it is the knowledge that they can recall, that is stored, the knowledge which is stored in their minds. Problem solving, even when the knowledge is relevant to the problem at hand. Knowledge remains inert when it is not available for transfer. Again, it remains inert. It just stays in the mind. It's just stored in the mind. If it was not transferred, if it is not transferred from the classroom context to the outside world. So if our students cannot make use of what they know to the real life situations, then those things that they know remain just to be inert knowledge. We know that when the psychological conditions of learning and application are matched, what has been learned is more likely to be transferred. When the psychological conditions of learning, at the same time, there is the application, we can match how they apply it and what's in their mind, then the learning can be transferred. Thus, rules and forms learned in isolated, meaningless drills may be harder to retrieve in the context of communicative interaction. So, when we say communicative interaction, and when you isolate the rules and forms um, from application, then teachers would have difficulty achieving communicative competence among the students. Finally, student motivation is likely to be enhanced if students are able to interact. So, if students are able to interact in a way that is meaningful to them, if they know that what they are learning, what they are being taught, what the forms that they are trying to learn are important in their day-to-day conversations and in their day-to-day lives, then they would be likely to be more motivated. Then, two, they are likely to be more attentive if they are saying something meaningful. Identifying the type of learning involved helps us to think about the desirable characteristics of any practice activity. For instance, for declarative knowledge to be proceduralized, a great deal of meaningful practice would be required. Meaningful practice. Further, students would have to receive feedback on the accuracy with which they produced the target form. You provided the students with exercises, you provided the students with practice, but at the same time, teachers need to provide them with feedbacks as well in terms of the accuracy. Finally, for proceduralization to occur, it would seem important to concentrate on only one or two forms at a time. So you cannot teach very um, a number of forms, a number of rules at a time, but you can just focus on only one or two forms. You should just focus as a teacher on one or two forms at a time. Although, of course, the target form could be introduced in contrast to forms that the student already controls. So we know that the students uh, already have learned about different rules, different structures in their minds. So those forms that you are introducing in your class may interact with those things that they already learned. If our students show us that they are struggling with the inversion of the subject, for example, and operator in yes no questions, it would be clear that their immediate learning challenge is linguistic form. We will need to design or select an activity that encourages meaningful practice of the pattern. So, our role as teachers is to, as mentioned here, design, design and create activities which would practice those problems of our students, those forms, which would highlight those forms. Let's have meaning. If the teacher has decided that the challenge of a particular structure lies in the semantic dimension, has something to do with the meaning, then a different sort of practice activity should be planned. It would seem that meaning would call for some sort of associative learning, where students have opportunities to associate the form and the meaning of the particular target structure. So there should be association between form and meaning, acknowledging that the problem of the students have something to do with the meaning, the semantics. It has been our experience that repetition is not needed to the same extent as it is when teaching some aspect of formal dimension. Repetition is not needed at some extent. Sometimes a single pairing of form and meaning suffices. You try, as teachers, we try to pair form and meaning. Due to memory constraints, it seems prudent to restrict the number of new items being practiced at any one time to between 2 and 6. The students would receive feedback on their ability to demonstrate that they had acquired the form meaning bond. So again, the role of feedback is present. According to this book of Selsa Mursa and Hillis, they mention that when dealing with the semantic dimension, realia and pictures are very useful. So now we talk about instructional materials which we can use. We can make use of realia and pictures. For example, if the teacher has decided to work on the semantics of comparative forms in English to support some communicative task or content, he or she might show students pairs of pictures and work with them to make comparisons using the form that reflects the relation depicted. So when it has something to do with that particular topic on comparative forms, then you can make use of pictures. Actions too can make meaning salient. Actions. The initial challenge for ESL EFL students grappling with prepositions is to associate the core meaning. So usually students would have difficulty associating the core meaning with each preposition. Thus, prior to having students work on direction, giving tasks using maps, a good strategy might be to work with students on having them make an association between a preposition and its meaning in locating objects in space. Meaning you can provide your students with tasks like walk to the corner, turn right at the corner, the cinema is near the corner, next to the bank, and things like that. The meaning. One way of doing this is to conduct, how can you do this? Total physical response, the TPR, total physical response, a sequence where students act out a series of commands along with the teacher, involving the placement of objects in various parts of the room, like put a book next to the desk, put a pen on the book, walk to the door, stand near the door, and etc. Then we have the use. Use. Let's talk about the use. When use is the challenge, it is because students have shown that they are having a hard time selecting the right structure or form for a particular context. There is an issue on which structure should I use in this particular context, in this particular situation, in this particular speaking engagement. Working on use will involve students learning that there are options to be exercised and that they must select from among them the one which best suits a given context. So students should be able to choose the best structure, the best form that they should use in a given context. Thus, relevant practice activities will provide students with an opportunity to choose from two or more forms. There again enters the role of practice activities, the one most suitable for the context and how they wish to position themselves, like in a cooperative way, a polite way, an assertive way. It depends upon the situation. And students should be able to determine the one that they would be using in such situations. Students would receive feedback on the appropriateness of their choice. The students would be given the feedback. The teachers would be the ones to give the feedback as to whether the ones that they chose were appropriate or not. Role plays. Role plays work well when dealing with use because the teacher can systematically manipulate social variables. Increase or decrease the social distance between interlocutors, for example. to have students practice how changes in the social variables affect the choice of form. So role plays could be a nice activity. For example, if students have shown that they do not know how to use modals to give advice, they might be asked to role play having a dilemma. There's somebody who's having a dilemma, like in this case, the keys to the car have been lost. The car is locked and the person wants to get in. So then the group members would be tasked to come up with an advice using modals. It should be noted that the pie chart, when you say the pie chart, we have the form, the use, and the meaning. The observations about learning and the characteristics of practice activities enumerated here may not significantly alter the way grammar is taught today. The way grammar is being taught today is totally different. But indeed, many of the activities recommended here are currently being used. They are already being used. What these tools do offer, however, is a principled means for dealing with grammar. We should be able to understand why we should make use of these activities, of these suggestions in our grammar lessons. And that's it for today. Thank you.